Well, good morning to everyone, and thank you for joining us. There's an interesting piece in the Washington Post today entitled, Lots of Republicans Suddenly Think the Economy Wasn't That Bad After All. Polling from YouGov shows a sharp shift in Republican opinions over the past month. In the 1980s, Republican strategist Lee Atwater told us that perception is reality. How much of this is based upon perception versus reality? Let's connect some dots and find out.
Connecting the Dots with Dr. Wilmer Leon, where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge.
Welcome to the Connecting the Dots podcast with Dr. Wilmer Leon, and I am Wilmer Leon. Here's the point. We have a tendency to view current events as though they occur in a vacuum, failing to understand the broader historical context in which most events take place. During each episode, my guests and I have probing, provocative, and in-depth discussions that connect the dots between these events and the broader historic context in which they occur, thus enabling you to better understand and analyze the events that impact the global village in which we live. On today's episode, the issue before us is, what can we expect for the United States and global economies moving forward in this new era of a Trump regime? And my guest is an associate professor of economics at the University of Missouri, Kansas City, former president of the National Economics Association, Dr. Linwood Tauheed. As always, my brother, welcome back. Welcome back, Linwood. So while we work through this technical issue, let me see where we are. Oh, he's still working on his audio there. You got me, Linwood?
Thank you. Okay. Thank you. It's always a pleasure to be here.
Okay, and let the audience know you're joining us from overseas, and so there may be a bit of a delay, but we will work through these issues as we have to. So I want to open this discussion with the opening paragraph from this piece in the Washington Post that I just referenced, because there are a couple of elements that I want to point out. So, quote, Joe Biden was elected in 2020 as voters rejected the incumbent president, Donald Trump. But thanks in large part to price surges that followed the coronavirus pandemic, Biden's approval rating plunged. He was so poorly positioned for re-election that he abandoned his bid with his vice president, Kamala Harris, earning the nomination instead. It wasn't enough that the electorate swung from the left back to the right in Trump's direction. Your thoughts, a couple of things here. One, this whole idea of price surges following the coronavirus pandemic and Biden's approval rating plunging. How significant was that to public perception about economic stability? Dr. Tauheed. Oh, now we've lost him. Okay, well, while we're working on him reconnecting, let me just pick it up from there and point out a couple of things. I say all the time that when you read articles like this, I think it's very, very important to be a discerning reader, because there are subtle and then there are not so subtle elements that they'll put into an article in order to create consent and also to shift a discussion or to control a narrative. So first of all, there were significant price surges that did follow the coronavirus pandemic, and the Washington Post is correct. The Biden's approval rating did plunge. But what I think was missed by a lot of people was that was outside of the control of Joe Biden, because this was a global pandemic. And as a global pandemic, you all probably remember hearing a lot of discussion about supply chain, and remember all the discussions about the ships off the coast of Los Angeles that were sitting out in the Pacific Ocean because they weren't able to get to port. And not with those ships being able to get to port, people, they weren't able to unload their cargo. And so that created a incredible depletion in terms of parts availability, finished product availability. It was hard to get cars. It was hard to get parts for cars. It was hard to get smaller consumer household items. A number of things that were being manufactured overseas, particularly in China and other Asian countries, it was very, very difficult to get those items. And that was totally outside of the control of the administration. Let's see if we have Professor Tauheed back. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay.
Okay, yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Great. So
okay.
So did you hear the read of the first paragraph from the article?
I did.
Okay.
And
go ahead, please.
Yeah, my response was, of course, that yes, the inflation that was blamed on Joe Biden wasn't caused by Joe Biden. We talked about this many times in terms of the supply chain crisis. Now, this was a follow-on event for COVID. Donald Trump was president during that COVID crisis, and the inflation that occurred during the Biden administration was a follow-on to the COVID crisis, but not in the way that many people think. Many people are some are saying that particularly conservatives are saying that it was a result of spending, particularly spending during the Biden administration, that caused an excess of money to flow, and therefore it raised prices. But the cause of that, which we had noticed well before that, was the supply chain crisis. The fact that supplies of goods, particularly goods from China, but other places, had decreased because China had cut down their shipping and production facilities, and that caused the prices of things to go up in this country. Food that's imported into this country, the prices went up, and other things. But there was also another aspect of it, which has now been termed greedflation. Suppliers of products that did not have much of a price increase began to increase their prices because they were following on the inflation bandwagon. They could always blame it on inflation. And there was an estimate that about 40% of the prices in food and gas and so forth was a result of companies increasing their prices much more than they needed to. So there was a greedflation process. Now President Biden attempted to address that by jumping on the gas, the energy suppliers, saying that they needed to lower their prices. They did not do that. They essentially ignored what his recommendation. But he wasn't responsible for that inflation. That was a follow-on event for COVID, and neither was President Trump responsible for that. There are things that are out of control of the president of the United States, particularly when we're talking about international trade.
In fact, I'm glad you made that point, because I had planned to bring it up a little later in the conversation, and I still might, but let's address that right now, because a lot of people, I think, really don't understand economic cycles. They don't understand that.
I'm getting a lot of breakup here, so I can barely hear you.
Okay. Can you hear me now? Okay, he's locked up. So a lot of people really don't understand the power and the process of economic cycles, and they want to subscribe and assign things to a presidential administration that don't necessarily. Okay, we'll go ahead. We appreciate your effort. We appreciate your effort, and we're going to go ahead and we'll just go ahead and move on because this is going to be really difficult to do. So, folks, to Dr. Tauheed's point, and I'll do my best to carry this conversation for the remainder of the program. There are a number of things that get either attributed to or blamed towards an administration that have nothing to do with the administration itself. The economy operates in cycles, and outside of the control of a particular administration. So a number of things that Joe Biden got blamed for were not his fault. They were cyclical economically. A number of things that Donald Trump that people wanted to attribute to his administration were cyclical. So it usually takes, I'll say, a year and a half to 2 years from one administration to another administration for these cycles to run their course. And so, to the point, Joe Biden got blamed for things that weren't his responsibility, and he was given credit. And I'm sorry, folks, we're still trying to salvage this in some form or fashion. Okay. So that point has been made. And so Dr. Tauheed is going to try to give me 1 second here. He's going to try to join us through another mode. Okay. So with that, I think we've beat that horse to death on that point in the article. Let's move on to the next point. And this is something that jumped out at me in the first paragraph of this Washington Post piece, that Biden was so poorly positioned that he abandoned his bid, and Kamala Harris earning the nomination instead. The word earning. And folks, this isn't haterade on Kamala Harris. She did not earn the nomination. She was given the nomination by the elite in the Democratic Party because Joe Biden took so long to get out of the race that many in the elite felt that there wasn't enough time for them to have any type of primary process where a list or slate of potential candidates could be either presented to the American people or presented to the elite, and allowing the elite to elect a nominee. And so, contrary, James Carville in his New York Times piece warned the Democrats, do not anoint her as the nominee, that this process has to be done in public, and that one of the things that Donald Trump wanted the Democrats to do was to appoint a nominee behind closed doors in secret, because he very clearly understood the impact that this was going to have on the perceptions of the electorate. So for the Washington Post to write this piece that she earned the nomination, that is just foolishness. There we go. Okay. So again, still trying to connect with Dr. Tauheed, and he's trying to join us via phone. So again, folks, this is live, so sometimes these things happen. So the next thing, let me see. Let me do this. Give me 1 second here, folks, and let me ask my producer a question. Can he call into this, Melody, or does he have to? Let me see here. Hang on 1 second for him. Oh, okay. Thank you. All right. Okay, sorry, folks. Please bear with me. All right. Sorry for that technical problem. And again, our guest is joining us from overseas, and there are some technical problems with the strength of signal. So that is why we were having this issue. And so now he's trying to rejoin. You hear me? Are you able to hear me now? Okay, I don't think this is going to work. I'll continue, and if he hears me, then he'll jump into the conversation. So that's why I was saying, um, reading with a very discerning ear, and that again, that and this isn't haterade, and I don't want people to interpret this as though I'm anti Kamala. I'm just looking at the reality of this, and folks saying, well, she earned it, she earned it, she earned it. No, she didn't. She was appointed, she was anointed, and that was one of the issues that resulted in some of the problems that she had. Another issue that I have with this, or a question that I had for Dr. Tauheed in this, is in the end of this paragraph, it says that the electorate swung from the left back to the right. And one of the takeaways that I have from that statement is they're making it appear as though this was an ideological shift. And I don't really know, and I say this, I'm not trying to be coy here or clever. I don't honestly know if this was so much of an ideological shift as much as it was realpolitik, and people just looking at their bank books, looking at their wallets, and making a conscious decision. My life was better economically then than it is now. I don't know how much of this is really a shift in party dynamic as it's a shift in politics. And so I just wanted to point that out. I think that the Post was a bit irresponsible in the manner in which they were trying to present this issue. And we talked about with Professor Tauheed briefly. You hear a lot of analysts say, and they support this position by exit polling and by independent polling, that a lot of voters cast their ballot because they felt the economy was better during the Trump administration. And in terms of the middle class and the working class and the poor, was this really the case? And I don't believe that it was. I I don't think that the numbers really showed us that the working class and the middle class and the poor were faring any better than under Trump than they were under Biden. And let's see one more time if Dr. Tauheed can hear me. Are you there? I hear him. There we go. Dr. Tauheed. It doesn't look like that's going to work. Dr. Tauheed. No, he can't hear me. So we'll just go ahead and move on. So the numbers don't really support that. I think going back to Lee Atwater's point, I think that perception is reality, and that even though a lot of people may have perceived this to be such, that it wasn't really the case. Some of this, I think, was also promoted by the media, and was not necessarily reflected in reality. So as we look at some of these other issues as it relates to this, and again, I really have to reiterate that the president, that the administration does not really play an important role or a decisive role in the economy. It's the cyclical nature of economics that's more independent of the executive than most voters really understand. In fact, an example of this, and we've talked about this before, but I'm going to reiterate this. An example of this is the Fed's approach to dealing with inflation. The Fed's approach to dealing with this incredible inflation was to deal with interest rates, was to play with interest rates, lowering interest rates, basically taking them damn near down to zero, giving free money to banks and other financial institutions. And one of the most important reasons why the Fed did that was because dealing with interest rates is the only tool that the Fed has in its toolbox. Interest rates is all the Fed can do. And as Dr. Tauheed was talking about in the open, and as I was talking about, this particular inflation that hit the country and hit the global economies during COVID, was not the typical too much money chasing too few goods. There were no goods to chase. So dealing with interest rates, making it either more expensive to buy money or making it cheaper to buy money, was not going to impact the fact that it was a supply chain issue and there was nothing out there to buy. So and why, for example, Vice President Harris, why President Biden could not come to the American people and just explain that very clearly and explain that very simply is beyond me. I just explained it to y'all. I just explained it. So I don't understand. And I think if Dr. Tauheed were here, I know he would agree with me because we've had these conversations before. I know if Dr. Desai were here, she would agree with me because I've had these conversations with her. I know if Dr. Jack Rasmus were here, he would agree with me because we've had these conversations before. So, that addresses that. So here's what I see as being really the point of this article. And they say, during the Trump administrations, Republicans were much more likely to say that their economic position had improved. And under Biden, far more were likely to say that it got worse. But since 2022, more than half of Republicans have said their economic situations have declined over the past year. But suddenly, interestingly enough, over the last month, Republicans are saying that they were doing worse than a year ago. And that, I think, has a great amount to do with the dynamics of media, and that now that Donald Trump is the president-elect, they're trying to put as much of a positive spin on the incoming administration as they possibly can. And I see Dr. Tauheed gallantly trying to join us again. I don't know if he can hear me. Speak up, sir, if you can. Are you there? I see he's still muted. Let's see what we can get here. Again, appreciate you folks staying with me on this as we try to bring him up, because this was going to be a phenomenal conversation with Dr. Linwood Tauheed, but we're still struggling with this. So rumination with Andrew, I think the economy was better prior to the global pandemic. Oh, that's true. Rumination with Andrew, you're absolutely right. The economy was better prior to the global pandemic. And to your point, I don't think many people would debate that point. The issue is, once we got into the pandemic, who was responsible for what? And the issue is, a lot of folks are being blamed for things that were totally beyond their control. And people are trying to assign positive aspects that were beyond their control. For example, during the pandemic, the Trump administration did a lot of spending. They pumped a lot of money into the economy. And contrary to what Republicans' standard policy is, they tend to be anti-social spending, but the dynamics of the pandemic forced their hand, and they had to pump money into the economy. And that attributed greatly to the economic cycle that we saw. But a lot of people just try to make it, oh, I got my stimulus check, I got my stimmy, and since I got my stimmy, all was right with the world, as though that money was going to continue flowing. And we know that spigot got turned off. In fact, one of the big mistakes I think the Biden administration made was aid to family with dependent children, or the WIC program, because there was a lot of money that went into child poverty programs during the COVID pandemic. And I think it was the second or the end of the first year or the end of the second year of the Biden administration, they cut that spending out. There were articles showing that child poverty was dramatically reduced, almost eliminated in a statistical context. It's important to say, in a statistical context. And why the Biden administration did not continue that spending is totally beyond me. Because imagine what Vice President Harris would have been able to say on the campaign trail if she had looked at the American people and said, we eliminated child poverty over the last 3 years. Imagine the power that would have come from a statement of that manner. Yes, we spent money. Yes, we had to spend money. And as a result of our spending money, we eliminated child poverty. If she could have said that, that's a deliverable. But they cut out that spending, and child poverty went back up. And yes, Shelley, child poverty increased under Biden after they cut the spending going in. And again, this gets back to the cyclical nature of economics. At the beginning of the administration, it was getting lower, and once they cut the spending, it went up. Um, um, Shelley, war spending is the only thing holding the economy together. That's a very, very, very good point. War spending is one of the few things that is holding the economy together. And I tell you this. Let's see now.
I'm on Wi-Fi, so hopefully this will be better.
Okay. Well, we can hear you, we can see you, and hey, man, I can't thank you enough for your diligence and your Herculean effort.
You have no idea how many bosses I had to talk to get into this room. So
okay. Well, thank you. Don't know how much of this you've heard. In fact, let's do this, because there was a discussion. I was talking about the cyclical nature of economics and that presidents have very little to do with it. And I was talking about early in the Biden administration, child poverty was just about eliminated.
Right.
And that the Biden administration cut that spending to WIC and to what we used to call AFDC, or aid to family with dependent children. And that as a result of their cutting that spending, child poverty went back up. Your thoughts, Dr. Tauheed?
Yes, it is. Child poverty was cut almost in half because of the extra child tax credit, the increase in the child tax credit, and when that child tax credit expired, the Democrats were still in control of Congress and, of course, the presidency. And they allowed that child tax credit to expire, the additional child tax credit, which meant that those nearly half of the child population that came out of poverty, over the poverty line, went back into the poverty line. That was a major discussion of the failure of the Democrats, who were in charge of the process, who could have done something to extend the child tax credit, but did not do so. And so, there are a number of things like that the Biden administration missed as an opportunity to do better.
While you were trying to rejoin us, I made the point that had Kamala Harris been able to say on the campaign trail, we've reduced child poverty by 75%, or that would have been an incredible talking point. That would have been an incredible demonstration of deliverables, and she was not able to make that point.
Yeah, she wasn't able to do that. Of course, Biden's popularity was down, if I remember, in the 30s.
Right.
Yeah, low 30s. And, Kamala Harris, when she ascended to the nomination, just continued on with that lack of popularity. She wasn't able to distinguish herself from the Biden administration. But as you said, she also wasn't able to take credit for things that she should have been able to take credit for, because the Democrats didn't follow through on
that. Thank you. So let's move on to Donald Trump and his anticipated economic program. On the campaign trail, he laid out a broad array of ideas, very little policy, but a whole lot of talking points. He talked about providing tax relief, cutting prices, hiking tariffs. Let's talk about some of those things. He wants to extend. Well, go ahead. I'll let you take it from there.
No. I mean, yes, you're absolutely right that he had lots of talking points, but no details, and so nothing that you could actually evaluate in terms of policy. Although things like eliminating the tax on Social Security benefits,
Mm-hmm.
and the tariffs. All of those are, even as they're talking points, there is a way of evaluating them. And he had a mixed bag. He kind of had something for everyone. So he had something for the working class, for retirees in terms of Social Security, eliminating the tax on Social Security. Something for the working class, for example, eliminating taxes on tips and eliminating taxes on overtime. I mean, he had tax cuts for everybody, including the wealthy. Right? He had tax cuts for everyone. Now, the question is, can a government reduce these taxes and still maintain the spending that it's responsible for? So if you've got programs like Medicare and Medicaid, you've got the Affordable Care Act, which is a subsidy from the government to many persons, low and middle income persons who are getting a subsidy from the government. If you reduce taxes, then you have a difficulty maintaining those programs. And so there is an analysis that can be made, even though there weren't any details, to eliminate, for example, the tax on Social Security. Helps those who are receiving Social Security now. But if your Social Security, if you're a younger person, you're not yet retired, and there's no tax on Social Security benefits, then that's going to reduce your Social Security benefit when you retire. So even though there's a benefit for one part of the proposal for those who are currently retired, and federal tax on those Social Security benefits will be eliminated, then eliminating the payroll tax on tips and other kind of things is also going to cause a downstream problem for persons when they do retire. So even though he didn't have a lot of specifics, you could evaluate them in terms of current and future economic and income benefits or liabilities for persons. Essentially, he promised everything to everyone, and it was obviously a campaign promise, but implementing those things is going to be much more difficult because, of course, you have the Republicans who are now in control, who will be in control of the Senate and the House. And Republicans will go for lowering taxes on the wealthy. They won't necessarily go for lowering taxes on the middle class and the working class.
Ruminations with Andrew asked what I think is a very good question and a brilliant question for you. How much do the financial elites control the cyclical nature of economics?
How much do the financial elites control the cyclical nature? Well, there is an inequality problem in which, as income is generated, you've got corporations, for example, that have massive increases in their profitability. That profitability comes from somewhere. And so when you increase the prices of goods, particularly hiding behind inflation, from supply chain inflation, you hide behind that and you have a 40% increase in prices beyond what needs to be because of the increase in costs. That's going to cause some problems for the working class and the poor. And when you have then high inflation, that causes a problem in terms of housing sales, housing construction, because sales are down, and so forth. So the inequality, the moving of money into corporations, because allowing them to have excess profits, is going to have an effect on the rest of the economy. So in this case, as Wall Street does well, Main Street suffers the consequences.
As Wall Street does well, Main Street suffers the consequences. And that takes me back to one of the points I was making while, again, you were gallantly trying to rejoin us, and that is, we kept hearing, particularly during the Biden administration, the economy was doing well, the economy was doing well, but that was the financialized side of the economy. We heard a lot of analysts saying, and a lot of exit polling data saying, people thought during the Trump administration that they were doing better. In terms of the middle and working classes and the poor, were they really doing better under Trump?
Some were surprisingly doing better under Trump. When you had minimum wage workers, $7.25 an hour, who are earning on a 40-hour week $290, and after taxes are taking home about $250
a week.
A week.
Wait a minute. $250 a week.
Yes.
In the working 40 hours a week.
Yes.
In the United States.
Yes.
In 2022.
Exactly. That's, of course, not enough to pay your bills. You certainly need 2, 3, or 4 persons in your family. And if you're now working minimum wage, okay, and you lose your job, which many minimum wage workers did, then during this happened during the Trump administration, when there was a supplement made to unemployment insurance, so that many of those persons who were now unemployed, minimum wage workers, were bringing home in their unemployment insurance about $300 a week. That's more than they were bringing home when they were working. And in fact, there were complaints about that from Republicans, that this was going to cause people to become lazy. They don't want to work now because they can make more money while they're unemployed than working. Okay. But if you are one of those persons and you were laid off and now you're bringing home more than you were when you were working, you are doing better. Now, I look at what Donald Trump did during the pandemic, and you can see it in the graphs. Unemployment shoots up, unemployment comes down very quickly. That's because Donald Trump started to spend money into the trillion, pushing it into the economy. Now, that would be a Keynesian move. That's an FDR type move. Now, understand, I'm not saying that Donald Trump is equivalent to an FDR. What I'm saying is he spent the money. And the way I rationalize that for someone like a Donald Trump is that he understands that if he spends money into the economy, allowing people to pay their rent, well, he's a real estate magnate. So if they can pay their rent, that money keeps flowing to him. He understands that government spending and deficit spending ends up in someone's pocket, and much of that ends up in his pocket. He understood that. And so he had no qualms with spending and spending and spending, because it helps him, it helps his friends, it helps other billionaires in the economy. It just so happens it also helps working and middle class persons. That's a side effect, not a desired goal.
And money in pocket equates to ballots in boxes. Exactly.
And so when people are saying they were better off under Trump, that's what they're remembering.
Right.
Now, yes.
And wait a minute. And to that point, because that takes me right back to one of the points that I made in the open, where I was made the point that perception is reality. And Lee Atwater was very clear on that point. So is that evidence of, and I hate to quote Lee Atwater, but sometimes, so is that evidence of that?
Well, I would be even stronger. I'd say reality is reality.
Okay.
I mean, it was a reality for some who were low-wage workers, and it's not just those who are making $7.25. Those who are making $8 and even a little more are also in that category of bringing home more money than they were, unemployed than they were employed. In addition, we had pandemic payments that were being made to businesses so that businesses did not have to lay off their employees. They were being paid to maintain their employees. So if you're in business or small business and you're getting money from the government that eventually ends up as a grant, not something you have to pay back, in order to keep your business running, you are doing, you're grateful to the government. And that person who was the president at that time was Donald Trump. Now when Biden comes into the presidency, he passes the infrastructure bill, the bipartisan infrastructure bill,
right?
Which means that when Kamala Harris or when Biden or Kamala Harris is on the campaign trail, they can't claim the infrastructure bill because Donald Trump can say the Republicans are as responsible for that infrastructure bill as Democrats are. So here's another thing that the Biden-Harris administration could not claim on their own, even though it was spending into the economy that helped the economy.
Let me ask Charles a question. Charles, you made a comment about Scott Ritter and Fluffy. Was that a serious question? Let me know whether or not I actually need to answer that question. Is the infrastructure bill, is the result of the infrastructure bill as substantial to the economy? And I, in this question, equate substantial to the economy. Is that benefiting working and middle-class Americans to the degree that the Biden administration wants us to believe that it is?
Yeah, I think it is. We're talking about $1.2 trillion for infrastructure. And this country, of course, seriously needs infrastructure, building and rehabilitation. We have roads that are collapsing and bridges that are collapsing all over the country, and that's keeping people in the building trades working. Highway workers, construction workers, water system workers, and other workers. We're talking about highly skilled workers. We're talking about middle class and lower upper class workers. I mean, you might not think of a building trades person as an lower upper class person, but we're talking persons who are making over $100,000 in the building trades. And yes, it keeps those persons working, but again, the Biden administration can't solely claim responsibility for doing that. That gets shared with the Republicans, and at least in the first 2 years of the Biden administration, there was no need for bipartisanship on this, unless you look at the bipartisanship between the Democrats and Joe Manchin. Joe Manchin would have been lax, would have been reluctant, I think, to stand in the way of an infrastructure bill that would have created jobs in West Virginia. So I don't think the Biden administration actually needed to do that with the Republicans, and if they had done it, they could have claimed that they kept America working.
Ruminations with Andrew. Yes, I will invite Professor Hudson on. I'll do that. And Rumination also says, but Joe Biden infused a lot of money as well. It was a bipartisan effort. I think that would be referring to the infrastructure bill. But when you look at, I'm gonna make a generalization here that I think a lot of people will make. When you look at those companies that are making the money from the infrastructure bill, a lot of people, that goes to a lot of Latino households because they are incredibly prominent, if not dominant, in the construction trades, areas that we have forsaken for a number of reasons. And that impacts their perception on the economy. And many of them then can say, I was doing better then than now.
Yeah. And let me make a little change of language, because It's not the African American community that forsake the building trades. It's the building trades
Trades
that
forsake us.
the African American community. You know, there was a time when there were vocational schools in black school districts.
Right.
Those vocational schools closed and moved out to the suburbs. And so you had the majority white suburbs who were learning how to be carpenters, electricians, and other kinds of building trades persons. And then you get the movement into the building trades by the non-union immigrant construction workers who are making much less than union workers. But the opportunity for African Americans to work in those fields was taken away because of a lack of education. And so if you are a migrant construction worker and you are continuing to work, the bipartisan infrastructure bill is helping you to continue work. Although a lot of that work is union work only in terms of the bill, that is, it only supports union work and not the non-union work. But if you're doing if you're supporting union work in an infrastructure bill, there's also extra non-union work that's going to be available in areas like housing and so forth. And so migrant construction workers were also helped by the bipartisan infrastructure bill.
And Good Times writes, blacks are kept out of the trades. Blacks did not forsake the trades, but we can't get caught up in binary thinking. These are multivariant equations. I will say one of the things that happened in the African American community was because not only were trade schools moved to the suburbs, trade classes were taken out of the high school curriculum.
Right.
Shop classes were taken out of the high school curriculum, as many of us in the black community shifted our mindset away from labor to college.
Mm-hmm.
Many of us gave up on the trades because we saw college as being the path to our future in the United States. So it's not as I'm saying that we contributed to this as well. That's my point.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with that. These are multi-factor issues, and so you know the vocational schools are moved out to the suburbs, and we don't complain, or because we are now focused on college education.
And again, shop classes were taken out of your local high schools.
Right.
So you could not get the introduction to being a carpenter or in fact, I live near Washington, D.C., as you know. I look at these brick masons. I look at people pouring concrete. I say, a generalization here, I know this isn't true, but to make the point, trying to find a brick mason, a black brick mason under the age of 50 is hard as hell.
Yeah, there's an expression that's come about as a result of this observation. I drive around the city, Kansas City, and you see very few BMWs. You know, you see very few black men working on construction work and highway work and other kinds of work going on, even in the inner cities.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So let's move back to some of Donald Trump's talking points and policies, because one of the things that I'm trying to understand, you said earlier that he has promised everything to everybody.
Yeah.
And so understanding that government revenue comes primarily from the tax base, if you're cutting taxes for everybody, where are you going to get your money from?
Well, but the other part of the Republican program, now this is the Trump program as a Republican, promising everything to everyone.
Right.
The other side of the conservative Republican program is we don't have the tax money coming in, so we have to cut social programs. And cutting a program, for example, like Social Security, really means privatization of Social Security.
Right.
that is, we're not going to collect any Social Security taxes, but if you want to take part of your income and send it off to a finance or investment house for a 401k or some other kind of investment vehicle, you can do that voluntarily. Many people won't be able to do that, and they will end up with no retirement, no pension, no Social Security, no retirement.
In fact, let me just jump in quickly and add, I want to say the number is about 33% of African Americans that depend solely on Social Security for their retirement.
That's right. That's the only retirement money they have. Pensions have used to be something that you could depend on, but we've gone from these defined benefit to defined contribution plans, and in that case, many persons are not contributing very much, if any, and so we don't have pensions. There's also the rating of pension funds by corporations and the ability to use that money for something else. And yes, around a third of African Americans who are retired only have Social Security as their income.
So expanding these tax cuts, understanding that Donald Trump's primary focus is on the 1%. Removing the tax on Social Security, I think that makes sense. Why? Because you've already paid tax on that money when you earned it, and so you shouldn't have to pay tax again on that money when it is returned to you in retirement. But I also think that the ceiling on the Social Security tax should be raised. And I make this point quite often, and people think I'm being too simplistic, but I don't think this one is too hard to figure out. Right now, what is the ceiling? About $143,000?
$168,000.
Okay, so if you make $168,000, you pay Social Security tax on that $168,000. If you make $168,001, you don't pay Social Security on that additional dollar.
That's right.
I say raise the ceiling. I'll pick a number, $1 million. You should pay Social Security tax on up to $1 million of salary, not income, salary. We're not talking about stock portfolios. We're not talking about 401ks. We're talking about if you're making $1 million in salary, you're making a hell of a lot of money.
Right. Bernie Sanders has proposed this consistently, and his is actually more liberal than that. What he's proposing is that income over $400,000 be subject to the Social Security taxes. So you would have Social Security tax up to $168,000. Excuse me, up to $400. You'd have a Social Security tax up to $168,000. Nothing on the $168,000 to $400,000. No additional Social Security tax. But if you're over $400,000, you would then come back into paying Social Security on that income. And the estimate from that is that additional Social Security tax on which is now being deferred would fund Social Security at an increased level, not the current level, an increased level through the end of this century. So when people are saying that we have a Social Security problem, that we're going to run out of money, the only reason we'll run out of money is because the millionaires and billionaires are not paying into the Social Security system. Now, one might argue that, well, they don't get as much back. I mean, they pay into the Social Security system, but they don't get anything back. What they get back is the security of workers who no longer have pensions, and the government is taking up the slack for those companies that don't have pensions. That the Social Security is the pension income that they have. They don't have to pay a pension or contribute to a pension fund because the government would be paying into that pension fund for them.
Before we, if you could just give me a couple more minutes, because I want to talk about the tariff issue, which I think is huge. But before we do, Good Time says the Black American male has been systematically de-skilled since the end of slavery in order to exclude the Black male from the skilled economy. You say that's Black Americans' fault? Good Times. We said nothing of the sort. And this, to me, shows, again, the danger of binary thinking, as well as people assessing statements through a bias. We never said that. The point that I made was many middle class African-American parents made the decision to take their children out of shop classes because they didn't want their children working in the skilled labor trades, thinking that their children were going to go to college. And college isn't for everybody. That's a fact. It's just a fact. It's not the sole reason that we are no longer represented in the trades that we used to be, but stop it. Listen to what is being said, not through the bias of what you want to hear and project, but listen to what is being said. So with that, Donald Trump and this whole tariff issue, that is nothing but a tax. And I don't think a lot of people understand, as Bobby Womack says, if you think you're lonely now, wait until that tariff comes. Dr. Tauheed.
Okay, first of all, what a tariff is a tax at the border for goods that are coming into the United States. And so a producer of a product that's going to be produced elsewhere, in a foreign country that is going to be eventually sold in the United States, there is a tariff put on that product. Trump has proposed a 10 to 20% tariff on goods coming into the United States, and up to if I understand, a 60% tariff on goods coming into the United States from China. That's part of his, economic war against China process. But the company that pays that tariff is the company that is selling that good into the United States, and so the price of the good becomes higher for customers in the U.S. It's not that the company that produces it takes the 10% hit. They're going to increase their prices, and so tariffs increase prices. Now, there are situations economically where a tariff makes sense. For example, if you want to incentivize production of a certain product in the U.S. instead of having it come into the U.S. from a foreign country, if you put a tariff on that product, making that product more expensive than the U.S. product, then people will begin to buy the U.S. product. That's a technique that has been used by this country and many other countries to incentivize domestic production. Now, there was a 100% tariff put on Chinese electric vehicles, so that the price of an electric vehicle that might be $40,000 is now going to be $80,000. That'll have an effect on the U.S. production of electric vehicles, assuming that the U.S. could increase its production of electric vehicles. But many of the products that are the components of these electric vehicles are also made in China. and so if you're going to go to war and put a tariff on electric vehicles from China, you also have to figure out how you're going to get the raw materials and the skilled labor to replace those electric vehicles that are not coming into the country from China. And so it's a half of a policy. It's a half of an industrial policy to make products more expensive, but not have a way to replace those products with with less expensive American-made products.
So how much of that do you think was just political diatribe and or just outright stupidity? Because for Donald Trump to say, I'm putting a tariff on everything that comes from China, well, then what you're basically saying is you're putting a tariff on everything because we don't make anything here anymore. And to your electric vehicle analogy, to your point, you have to decide domestically, we want to move into the EV market. And I don't think that decision has really been made in the United States. They see EVs as a necessary evil, not as preparing for the future, the inevitable future of the auto market. Is that fair to say?
Well, yeah, I mean, look, electric vehicles are new electric vehicle plants are heavily automated, and so they don't produce a lot of jobs. They even if you were to have an EV program, but you know, the most popular American-made quote American-made electric vehicle would be the Tesla.
Okay, right.
And well, Rivian is growing.
Yes.
But Tesla is
It's
still
a beautiful car.
Yes, Tesla is still there, but Tesla batteries are made in China. and so if you're going to say to the Chinese, we're not going to buy, we're going to put barriers up to buy your electric vehicles, they can come back and say, well, we're going to put barriers up to us selling you our batteries. And the thing is that the rest of the world, 3/4 of the world, which is being organized in terms of Brics and other economic cooperative organizations, they can become customers for Chinese electric vehicles.
Which many say, by the way, are the best electric vehicles made in the world.
Exactly. And what's not understood is that, you know, the U.S. used to be China's main #1 trading partner. It is no longer the China's #1 trading partner. The U.S. is no longer the #1 trading partner with China. China has found ways to sell its product to other countries, particularly as these countries that are joining Brics, and not only sell those products, but also make those products in terms of the rest of the majority of the world instead of the West.
And if you could now shift the conversation to Brics, the power of Brics, which is on the rise, it's not about to be minimized, lessened, it's unavoidable now. Talk about the power of Brics, which is only going to get stronger.
Yes, Brics, of course, started out with Russia, India, and China, those three. Brazil was added, and this is in 2009. Brazil
and South Africa.
And then South Africa was added. So that's the initial Brics. Then from 2009 through 2022, there was no movement in Brics. There was probably movement in development planning going behind the scenes, but nothing that was international. Then we get the Russia-Ukraine war, or special military operation. We get the sanctions from the West on Russia, and Russia in its maneuvering to avoid the consequences of those sanctions begins to now be more involved in developing Brics. So Brics begins to develop as a real entity only in the last 2 years, and part of that was you have $350 billion of Russian money that the West has in its banks that it's decided that it's not going to let Russia have control of, and also Russia is now excluded from the Western trading system called SWIFT. Other countries in the world are realizing that can happen to them as well. Mm-hmm. And so now we get other countries that want to join Brics, and Brics is officially with up to 11 official members, and I think it's just added 19 associate members. So Brics is growing, and it is realizing that there needs to be a different trading system so that the West cannot sanction them or keep their assets or do other kind of things to put them in economic bondage. And so that multipolar world that is emerging in terms of the economic basis of the world is accelerating in its process. And just in the recent Brics meeting in Kazan in Russia, and President Putin was the chair of that meeting. The Brics let it be known that they had a trading system, that they had a banking system, that they had other kind of systems that they're putting into operation as a way of having international trade among the three quarters of the world, no longer under the control of that one quarter of the world that is the West. And you know, there's lots of speculation that the Chinese wanted to replace the dollar with the yuan, to make the yuan the hegemonic currency in place of the dollar. Not what Brics is doing. Brics is setting up a trading system to allow countries to use their own currency, the currency that they control, that they produce, to use their currency to trade with any other currency, and they're creating a common currency that, you know, one currency would be translated into. You'd have an account in that common currency, which would then allow you to do trade with any other countries that is part of that trading system. So this is a democratization of finance, of international finance and international trade, as opposed to having one currency being the reserve currency.
And thank you, Raven Allen, for that super sticker. And unlike U.S., China desires cooperative trade, not global, not global, which is true. They have a win-win, what they call a win-win strategy. And that's not just hyperbole. That is an actual strategy that that China understands. If I benefit and you benefit, our benefit works out much better, much longer. Let me first also go back to Good Times, who says, okay, Wilmer, got you. I appreciate the elaboration. See, that's what happens with dialogue. When you dialogue with folks, you can work through issues and you can come to an understanding. Good Times, greatly appreciate that. Final question for you is, we've heard today that crypto is going through the roof. The value of crypto is going through the roof. You're shaking your head and chuckling. What does that mean to you?
Crypto is a Ponzi scheme. And as crypto is going through the roof, there are of course crypto billionaires who have convinced the general public that if they put their money in crypto, then their money will be safe from the collapse of the U.S. dollar in the Western. So it's a hedge against collapse against the U.S. dollar. The problem is, of course, when you buy crypto of any kind, that money goes into the crypto selling company, and then it sits there. It's not invested in anything. And so if you buy crypto today at $1,000 and tomorrow others buy, and so your crypto goes up to $2,000 or $5,000, that extra money only comes from those who have put new money into the crypto process. And if everyone wanted their money out at once, there would not be enough. The only thing there could be is the exact amount of money that everyone put in the beginning. So your crypto, which is now, you bought it $1,000, which is now $5,000, it's really only worth $1,000, assuming that the billionaires who own those companies don't take that money out and buy houses in the Caribbean and other kinds of things, and so you end up with less money. It's a Ponzi scheme. The fact that there is excitement about crypto is due to the success of the marketing campaign of crypto billionaires, not due to any intrinsic value for cryptocurrency.
So is there any final question? Is there any correlation between the election of Donald Trump and this, what they consider to be an incredible rise in crypto, other than he's a fraud and crypto could be a fraud too?
Well, the crypto billionaires contributed to both sides, the Republicans and the Democrats. And as a result of contributing to both sides, they got good recommendations and from either side. Kamala Harris was promoting crypto, and Donald Trump is promoting crypto, and so the campaigns were advertising vehicles for the cryptocurrency industry, and because of that, yes, the crypto has gotten greater notoriety, but it's we also have an increase in the number of indictments of crypto billionaires and failures of crypto companies because they are eventually all going to fail.
Dr. Linwood Tauheed, my brother, thank you, man. You did so much to join me today. Folks, y'all don't know what this brother went through to give us this time. And I truly, truly appreciate it, Linwood.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure. You always ask wonderful, insightful questions, and your audience is also on it. So I appreciate being with you.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. Shelley, China builds roads and bridges. The U.S. builds military bases. You are absolutely right. And there's no development in a military base. The economic development is incredibly limited. And if anybody in the United States in any position of authority could understand that, look at the Philippines. Look at what the United States has how the United States bases in the Philippines have decimated the Philippines. It happens time and place. Random Jack, I call it Betcoin. You're absolutely right. Every year since 1945, the U.S. has dropped more bombs than all the other countries put together. You are absolutely right. And looking at what's happening in Ukraine right now in response to Russia's military intervention is a perfect example of that. And what has Joe Biden done as he's exiting the Oval Office? Is he trying to pump more money into the U.S. economy? No. What is he doing? He's sending more weaponry over to Ukraine, which is an incredible fool's errand. Hey, folks, I got, again, much love, much thanks to Dr. Linwood Tauheed. Again, that brother went through a whole lot to give us that brilliance that he always does. So I really appreciate and thank him for joining us today. Thank you all so much for listening to the Connecting the Dots podcast with me, Dr. Wilmer Leon. Stay tuned. New episodes every day, Monday through Friday. So we've got an incredible show on Monday. Professor Francis Boyle is going to join us on Monday to discuss this announcement from yesterday that the International Criminal Court has just issued an arrest warrant for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his I think the President Gallant, or his Vice President Gallant. And what does that really mean? And for those of you who don't know who Francis Boyle is, look him up. Francis Boyle, Boyle. He is an expert in international law, has written a number. I don't know this, but he may have been involved in that ICC arrest warrant, because that guy has been involved in a number of phenomenal international criminal court issues. Please follow and subscribe, leave a review, share the show, follow us on social media. You'll find all the links to the show below. And remember, folks, that this is where the analysis of culture, politics, and history converge. Talk without analysis is just chatter, and we don't chatter here on Connecting the Dots. See you all on Monday. Until then, I am Dr. Wilmer Leon. Have a wonderful, wonderful weekend. Stay warm. Peace. I'm out.
Connecting the Dots with Dr. Wilmer Leon, where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge.